Any major project first requires a plan. A builder starts with blueprints. An artist begins with a series of sketches. A seamstress works from a pattern. And when you begin to write a research paper, you first need to organize your thoughts and the direction of your argument by creating an outline. You can think of an outline like the frame of a house. Even though there are no actual walls or windows or doors, the framework dictates where all those things will go. As you write your paper, you fill in the details by adding depth and color, but without the outline, you have nothing to build upon. Once you have read through your resources and notes, you should have a pretty clear idea of the direction of your paper and the kinds of supporting arguments needed to back up your thesis. Now it is time to organize all those ideas logically. Outlines may be written in two ways, in phrases and in sentences. Phrase outlines merely use key words to identify the thought you want to convey in your paper. Sentence outlines state each concept in a full sentence. As you organize your thoughts, your topic may lend itself to many questions. Should more money be allocated to the war on drugs? Are teenage prostitutes criminals or victims? Has the civil rights movement made permanent changes in our society? Because questions will occur to you as you begin to think through your topic, you may be inclined to use questions in your outline. But a sentence outline does not use questions. So you'll need to restate your questions as declarative sentences. Instead of asking, should more money be spent for the war on drugs, you could write, more money is needed for law enforcement officials to combat the sophisticated equipment used by drug lords. For the sake of brevity, we will use the phrase outline in our examples. Since many instructors prefer one form over the other, be sure to check with your instructor to find out if there's a specific requirement regarding which form to use. When you start writing your outline, don't worry about the form the outline will follow. You can do that later. In the beginning, just try to put something down in a logical manner. You can check the style later to be sure it follows the prescribed format. It really isn't until the end that you have to worry about the exact structure. Word processors frequently have outline capabilities that will help you with the process. If you're composing on the computer, check your software to see if it has an outline component. One method of writing the outline is the kitchen sink approach. That is, put down everything you can think of that relates to your subject. Next, order this list logically, and then trim it down to a reasonable length of 1 or 1.5 pages. Here's an example of how the process would work if you were writing a paper about the lottery. Let's say you chose the following thesis statement. Lotteries attract many people who normally wouldn't gamble, but who are willing to spend a few dollars for the possibility of a great return. In order to organize your thoughts, lay all of your note cards out in front of you. If you have many different headings on the note cards, you can group them. Using the kitchen sink approach, you list the following main ideas. First, there are the big winners we see on the news every time a large jackpot is won.
3, 2, 1. Let's find out who our newest millionaire is. Mary Lynch from Lake Worth, Florida, has won $1 million. Congratulations, $1 million, Mary Lynch.
Second, there is the question of the state government using the lottery to raise money for public programs such as education. Third is the issue of the amount of money spent on advertising and promoting the lottery.
Playing Megabucks every week.
Stop.
Once you win Megabucks,
Welcome home, Mr. Toohey.
life will never be the same.
Looking this over, it might seem as if you've pulled together a good outline. You've touched on all the areas you can think of relating to the lottery. But when you examine this outline more closely, you realize that the last two categories don't really have much to do with your thesis. Remember, The thesis states that the lottery is pulling many people into the game who normally wouldn't gamble. The allure of the lottery is really what's in question here. While concern about whether the lottery is a good way to raise revenue is a good issue, it doesn't directly affect a person's decision to play the lottery. So this category doesn't really fit your outline. The dollar spent on promoting the lottery is another cost issue. So both of these ideas can be eliminated from the outline. Now you make a new list. How do lotteries attract new people to the game? Again, using the kitchen sink approach. There are advertisements on television.
Reference?
Two things to note about the $79 million jackpot instant game. First, you can play almost anywhere. But remember, with 6 chances to win on a ticket, you can hit the jackpot almost anywhere, too.
As well as radio and newspaper ads.
Today, over 7,000 people like these will hit the numbers game. And the fastest and easiest way to get into the game...
And billboards. And there's the availability of the game. The fact that buying a lottery ticket is as easy as buying a loaf of bread. After much thought and referring back to your note cards, you come up with the following list of subheadings. Sample ads, seeing big winners on the news, targeting specific audiences, cost of the lottery tickets, views of advertising executives, how much states spend on advertising and promotion, placing lottery terminals in stores. All of the ideas listed here really can be lumped together under one main category: marketing and persuasive techniques. With several examples to support that idea, depending on the size of the assignment, you may have too many subheadings and will have to choose only the most important points. But for now, let's keep all the subheadings in the outline and save the editing for later. The problem with the outline as it stands now is that it makes only one main point. Outlines should consist of several main points and include the minor points relating to each of them. So the current outline is not balanced. You need at least 1 or 2 other main ideas in order to cover all the bases relating to this topic. What other issues come to mind when you think about lotteries? Well, there are the losers. There are the thousands of people who pay their money and don't hit the jackpot. How does this relate to the thesis? If you're going to look at people who are playing the lottery, then you need to include some specific cases. Why and how do they play? So a second heading could be people who play the lottery. What about these people? What can you put into this category? First, you might think of the people you know who play the lottery. You may have friends who buy tickets, but they probably don't represent a broad enough spectrum of income levels and occupations to be comprehensive enough for your paper.
Thank you.
After scanning through references, you come across several editorials as well as some articles with examples of people from different income levels who play the lottery. Of these profiles, you find 2 who have spent a lot of money on lottery tickets. Both of these references can become subheadings in this category. Let's say you also find an article with statistics on the numbers of people who play the lottery, broken down by income level and occupation. This information provides evidence that a number of people from different income levels play the lottery and will help you back up your other references. This fits under the heading of people who play the lottery. After writing down all the main points that relate to your thesis and supporting arguments, you need to go back and weed out the extraneous points. Next, arrange your points in some sort of logical order so that the most important points are listed first and the others follow in descending order of importance. You can now check to be sure you've got the form correct. Roman numerals for your main points, capital letters for your subheadings, numbers for any minor ideas under each subheading, and lowercase letters for any supporting details. Now you have a complete outline. You can tell just from looking at the outline what points will be raised and what comparisons will be made in backing up your thesis. Sometimes, however, preparing the outline will not be quite so straightforward. This is especially true if your original working thesis is either too broad or too limited. In the example we just saw, the outline was reworked until it fit the thesis. You may discover that your thesis must be rewritten before the outline can be completed. Rarely is your final thesis exactly like your working thesis. In fact, trying to mold your research and your outline into an inflexible thesis can become restrictive and binding in itself, and will ultimately hinder your writing rather than help it. Here's an example of how writing your outline might present you with new problems requiring you to modify your thesis. Suppose you're writing a paper on television sitcoms, and the thesis for your paper is situation comedies have changed in the past 40 years to reflect viewer attitudes. With this thesis, it might occur to you to list all the TV sitcoms you can think of over the past 40 years. So you sketch out the following outline.
Father Knows Best, I Love Lucy, Leave It to Beaver. Andy Griffith, Hazel. All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Alice, One Day at a Time. Cosby Show, Designing Women, Roseanne, Family Ties.
But after you do this, you're overwhelmed. How can you possibly discuss all these TV shows in one paper? Your outline is too extensive. When you go back to your thesis, you realize the outline doesn't address the main point of your paper. It doesn't seem like there is anything wrong with your thesis, just your approach. So, trying again, you ask yourself, how have situation comedies changed over the years? And you start a new list. To answer this, you list the differences in how the mother is portrayed, from Donna Reed to Roseanne. You could discuss the differences in moral values and how they've been portrayed, the inclusion of blacks in sitcoms, the changing role of women, or the way the family has been depicted over time. Your new outline does a better job of addressing your thesis. However, as you look at this outline, you realize that the scope of your topic is still too broad. Any one of these angles could provide you with enough material for a complete research paper. So you decide to modify your thesis. Of all the items on this list, let's say you decide you are most interested in the way the family has changed over time. So you change your thesis to read, the portrayal of the family in TV situation comedies over the past 40 years reflects changes in American society. This new thesis helps you refocus your outline. Now, 4 major headings occur to you. 1, traditional or nuclear families. 2, single-parent families. 3, blended families. 4, dual career families. These headings cover all the basic changes in family structure over the years and provide the most direct support for your thesis. Now you need to fill in program examples that best illustrate your main categories. You can go back to your original list of TV programs by era and match it to this outline. Obviously, Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver reflect the traditional family. One Day at a Time is a good example of a single-parent family, and Different Strokes is a good choice to round out that category because the single parent is a male. The Brady Bunch is the most obvious example of a blended family from 2 divorced households, and The Cosby Show, a good example of the 2-career family. Now you've managed to combine both of your outlines. You've got the major types of families divided into categories, and you've got the various sitcoms ordered chronologically and typed by category. You now have a manageable list of main ideas and supporting examples. This is only one example of how your thesis may need to be fine-tuned during the process of writing a research paper. In this case, the act of writing the outline made it clear that the thesis was too broad. But rewriting the thesis may be necessary at several points along the way. And it's important to remain flexible about this. There are several factors which will cause you to alter your thesis. You might come across new facts or information which affect your stance. You might discover that your sources do not agree. There might be a lack of supporting evidence for your thesis. Or there might be too much information, causing you to have to narrow your focus even further. Whatever the reason, You need to be aware that fine-tuning the thesis, though it is not outlined as an official step in the writing process, will undoubtedly be a necessary step somewhere along the way. So before we move on to writing the first draft, let's talk about this unofficial step in writing the research paper by looking at each of the factors which might cause you to reconsider your thesis. First, discovering new or previously unknown facts. This problem is most likely to occur as you read through your sources and take notes, but it can also arise when you begin to organize your information into an outline and realize you've overlooked some new research. For example, you might be writing a paper on cholesterol, and the working thesis might be, Americans should change their diets to minimize their intake of cholesterol. Your sources, no doubt, all support this thesis. You probably found many articles which warn of the dangers of high cholesterol. But suddenly, you come across this article in Time magazine. The article talks about a new concept you hadn't heard about before, that of good cholesterol. Now what do? Do you totally scrap the original thesis, or do you ignore the new information because at this point there's less written to support it? The problem in this case is that both facts are true. Cholesterol has been found to be good and bad for one's health, depending on the type of cholesterol. Perhaps there is a way to integrate both concepts into the thesis. You can acknowledge the new research without sounding wishy-washy about where you stand on the issue. Your new thesis might say, although recent research has shown some cholesterol to be good, most Americans should lower their intake of bad cholesterol. Another problem you might run into when gathering or organizing your notes is finding that there are disagreements between your sources. This is particularly true if you're dealing with a controversial issue. For example, many people feel that employers who require workers to take lie detector tests are invading their employees' privacy. However, there are just as many and equally qualified authorities on the subject who say that such steps are necessary precautions to guard against employee theft and substance abuse. Both make convincing arguments, but unlike our previous example, where conflicting facts needed to be integrated into the same paper, these are conflicting opinions. To write a thesis which includes both sides of this topic is like arguing out of both sides of your mouth. In this case, you will need to decide which side you are most persuaded by and write your thesis accordingly. You can acknowledge the other point of view in your paper and then take issue with it, but you would not state it in your thesis. The third factor affecting your original thesis is the lack of supporting evidence. Although your reasoning makes sense, you may have no research yet to back your theory, or material to back your thesis is simply unavailable. For example, you may know of a government report on your topic, but find that it is confidential and cannot be released to the general public. Or you may find that you've built your argument on old information, which is no longer relevant. In this case, you'll have to choose between picking an entirely new topic or broadening the thesis enough to make it supportable. Say, for example, your working thesis is parents who want to control hyperactivity in their children should avoid giving them milk products. As you begin to research this subject, you discover there isn't much written on the link between milk products and hyperactivity. This confuses you because you remember that your cousin had to give up milk as a child for his hyperactivity. So you read further and find that there is a connection between food allergies and hyperactivity. And there is plenty written about this. As you read more, you learn that an allergy to milk products is only one of several kinds of allergies which may cause hyperactivity. So you need to broaden your focus. Parents concerned about hyperactivity in their children should consider food allergies as a possible cause. There is ample material available to explain this thesis. Finally, there may be the opposite problem to contend with, an overabundance of material on the subject. Sometimes, before you actually sit down to write a paper, you may not realize how vast a subject you've chosen. Suppose you decide to write a paper on cocaine addiction. And your thesis is cocaine addiction is a critical problem in communities across America. When you enter the word cocaine under subject in the library computer, the machine literally explodes with information. Volumes of sources are available, and you realize you can't possibly read all this information or sort it into a logical outline without spending the next year or two on the project. Again, refining your thesis is necessary. So you sketch out a quick outline to see what kinds of issues there are. While doing this, you may realize that you're thinking primarily about cocaine addiction in the workplace. Even then, you may have too much information to contend with. What about cocaine in the workplace? Are you concerned about worker productivity, accidents, morale, cost to the employer? What? Your choice could depend upon which of those aspects yields the right number of sources for the required length of your paper. Or it could revolve around which aspect of the topic most easily follows a logical outline. For example, while there are only a few articles on employee morale and cocaine use on the job, when you write your outline, you may find that there aren't enough main points to raise. Changing your thesis to include costs to the employer, however, yields several more main points. It's always useful to approach the research and outline process with the understanding that your thesis is unproven and may therefore not be entirely valid. Like a doctor changing a preliminary diagnosis when the lab report comes in, your thesis may have to be amended perhaps several times in the course of your research. Each new step in the process will force you to ask yourself whether your thesis is still on target and whether you've been precise enough in stating your thesis to guide the direction of your paper.
True or false? Once you have read through your resources and notes, you should have a pretty clear idea of the direction of your paper and the kinds of information needed to back up your thesis. This statement is true. Since many questions may occur to you as you think through your topic, use those questions in your outline. False. Questions should not be used in an outline. Use only statements or phrases. Note card headings can be used as main points of an outline. This statement is true. The kitchen sink approach works best when a logical order is not immediately apparent. This is true. Your final detailed outline should include most of the information you have collected, including ideas only indirectly related to your thesis. This statement is false. Your final outline should include only those ideas which relate directly to your thesis. Your final thesis is often different from your working thesis. True. Discovering new or previously unknown facts is likely to occur as you read through your sources and take notes. True. Conflicting opinions can be integrated into your paper, but conflicting facts are best left unacknowledged. False. Conflicting information, whether fact or opinion, should be acknowledged. If you can't find enough supporting material for your thesis, you should find a new topic. False. If you can't find enough information to support your thesis, you can revise the thesis. An overabundance of material for your paper means that your thesis is not sufficiently narrowed. This statement is true.